St. Petersburg is a city of contrasts. Cobblestone streets steeped in history, elegant bridges arching over the Neva River, and an underbelly that breathes darkness into its ancient ruins. It is a city that remembers, where every shadow hides a whisper of the past. But in the winter of 2018, those shadows became something more, something alive. For months, the city was gripped by fear. Young women were vanishing, their lifeless bodies later discovered near the riverbanks, carefully posed, stripped of identification, and bearing no obvious signs of struggle. The city held its breath, knowing a predator walked among them. Then, just as suddenly as the killings had begun, they stopped. The reason? The prime suspect, 25-year-old Viktor Sokolov, had vanished. Viktor Sokolov had always been an outsider, reserved, intelligent, with an eerie stillness about him. He was the type of person who spoke little and observed much. He worked as a mechanic in a modest auto shop, a job that required precision but little social interaction. His colleagues described him as polite but distant, always keeping to himself. Those who knew him casually would never have suspected him of violence. But those who knew him well, if anyone truly did, spoke of something unsettling, a peculiar detachment, as though he were watching the world through glass, studying people rather than living among them. But in January 2018, Viktor Sokolov disappeared without a trace. His landlord was the first to notice something was wrong. Rent was due, and Viktor, who had never once been late, failed to pay. Calls went unanswered. His mailbox overflowed. When police conducted a welfare check, they found his apartment untouched. The bed was made, dishes were neatly stacked in the sink, and his phone and wallet were left in plain sight. The only thing missing was Viktor himself. At first, investigators believed he had been the victim of a random act of violence. St. Petersburg was no stranger to crime, after all. But as they dug deeper, the narrative twisted into something far more sinister. It started with a routine cross-check of missing persons and unsolved crimes. A forensic technician flagged Viktor's DNA as a partial match found on the body of Ekaterina Morozov, a 22-year-old university student who had been murdered 6 months earlier. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigative team. Further analysis tied him to 2 more victims, their bodies recovered under similar circumstances. Viktor wasn't a missing person. He was a suspect. Police scoured security footage from the night of his disappearance and found something even more chilling. A grainy video from a gas station camera captured Viktor standing by his car, shifting nervously, glancing over his shoulder. He was not alone. Just out of frame, a second figure lurked in the shadows. As investigators delved into Viktor's past, a disturbing pattern emerged. Inside his apartment, they discovered a hidden notebook tucked beneath loose floorboards. It contained pages upon pages of notes, meticulous details about his victims, their routines, the places they frequented, and the final moments of their lives. The writing was clinical, devoid of emotion. But near the end of the notebook, something changed. The careful documentation unraveled into erratic scrawls. Paranoia bled through the ink. I see him everywhere, watching. He knows. He knows what I've done. I'm being followed. Had Viktor been stalked? Or had his own conscience finally turned against him? A breakthrough came when an anonymous caller tipped off police about an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. When officers arrived, they were met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. The walls were streaked with blood. Rusted hooks dangled from the ceiling, casting elongated shadows that swayed like the ghosts of the dead. And in the center of the room, bound to a chair, was Viktor Sokolov. But what was left of him? He had been tortured. His body bore marks of slow, deliberate violence. But what stood out most was the method, his own signature. His ligaments had been severed, rendering him powerless, much like his victims. His throat had been slit, but not before he suffered. And on the wall, written in his own blood, were 4 words: "Justice is not blind." For weeks, the city buzzed with speculation. Who had killed Viktor Sokolov? A rival? A vigilante? Someone who had known his secret? The answer came in the form of Natalia Petrova. The younger sister of one of Viktor's victims, Natalia had spent months tracking him, watching her from a distance. When she uncovered the truth that the man who had taken her sister's life walked freely among them, she decided to take matters into her own hands. On the night of his disappearance, she had confronted him at the gas station, forcing him into her car at gunpoint. She drove him to the warehouse, where she made him feel every ounce of suffering he had inflicted on others. Her arrest was met with mixed reactions. Some saw her as a murderer, others as an avenger. In court, she showed no remorse. "I did what the law failed to do," she said simply. Her trial was swift. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison, though public opinion remained divided. The case of Viktor Sokolov left St. Petersburg scarred. It raised questions with no easy answers. Had justice been served, or had the cycle of violence merely continued? The riverbanks where his victims were found are quiet now, but the city remembers. It always remembers. And somewhere in the darkness, another monster waits. Thank you for watching. What out for part 2 of The Phantom of St. Petersburg?